Welcome to the Wanderer's Rest. Tonight, the bamboo forest waits in twilight stillness, and you are its guardian. The paths must be walked, the lanterns must be lit, and the sacred grove must be watched over through the gentle hours of night. Put down your burdens, step into the evening cool, and let the voice of the bamboo guide you into deep, peaceful sleep. You are safe here. Let us begin. The evening air is different here in the bamboo forest, cooler than the village below, carrying a particular quality of stillness that exists nowhere else, as though the towering stalks absorb sound and hold it suspended in their green cathedral, releasing only what they choose. The occasional hollow knock when two trunks sway and touch. The whisper of 10,000 leaves moving in breaths so gentle you feel them more than hear them. Your feet find the gravel path automatically after years of walking it. The smooth river stones rolled and arranged by hands long gone, maintained now by your attention, your daily raking, your care for this sacred space that has been in your keeping for longer than you can remember counting seasons. The light is fading quickly now, the way it does in summer. The sun dropping behind the western mountains and leaving only this brief window of purple-blue twilight that seems to emanate from the forest itself rather than from the sky. The bamboo stalks tower above you, some as thick as your torso, rising 30, 40 feet before their crowns spread and intermingle, creating a canopy so dense that even in full day, the forest floor exists in a green-gold dimness. And now, in this threshold hour between day and night, the space between the stalks fills with shadow that is not quite darkness, not yet, but rather a softening, a gentle obscuring that makes the familiar path feel both known and mysterious, both safe and worthy of attention. You carry nothing on this first evening round except your awareness and your presence. Walking slowly, your simple indigo cotton clothing blending with the gathering dusk, your straw sandals making the softest whisper against gravel, and you pause frequently, listening, observing, noting what has changed since morning. A bamboo shoot has emerged overnight, pale and perfect as carved ivory, pushing up through the leaf litter with the unstoppable patience of growth. A section of the path has collected more leaves than usual, blown from the canopy by afternoon winds you didn't feel down here in the forest's shelter. The small stream that runs along the eastern boundary sounds fuller, speaking of rain in the mountains, though the valley stayed dry. The bamboo speaks to you in its language of movement and sound. When wind comes, which it does now, in soft waves rolling down from the ridge above, the forest responds first in its upper reaches, the sound traveling downward like water, a rustling that grows and surrounds you and passes on, leaving the space somehow quieter than before. And in the wake of that sound, you hear the hollow knocking, that particular percussion that bamboo makes when swaying trunks touch and part, a rhythm without pattern, a music without melody. And you have learned over the years that this sound is different from the sound of bamboo touching in storm, different from the sound of bamboo in spring when the sap runs strong, different in every season and every weather. And this evening's knocking is the sound of summer stillness barely disturbed, contentment, peace. Fireflies are beginning to emerge, the first you've seen this evening. Small, cold lights appearing and disappearing in the undergrowth, near the stream, among the ferns that grow thick where sunlight manages to reach the forest floor. You stop walking and simply watch them for a time, these small lanterns of the natural world. And you think of the stone lanterns you will light soon, continuing the work these creatures do without effort, bringing light to darkness, marking the paths, showing the way. Though the way through this forest has been walked so many times by so many feet over so many years that it exists as much in memory and tradition as it does in the physical arrangement of stones. The first stone lantern stands where the main path branches toward the shrine. A ishidoro of weathered granite, its surfaces softened by decades of rain and covered in patches of luminous green moss that seems to hold its own light even before you open the small door in its base and introduce flame. From your sleeve, you withdraw the fire-making tools kept always ready, the small brass container of tinder, the flint and steel worn smooth from use, and you kneel on the gravel beside the lantern, feeling the coolness of the stones through your thin clothing, and you begin the familiar ritual of striking spark. The steel meets flint with a bright, sharp sound that seems loud in the forest quiet, and sparks arc briefly and die, and you strike again, until one spark lands true in the tinder and begins its small, insistent glowing. You blow on it gently, watching the orange point expand and brighten, and when it catches fully, you transfer it to the wick prepared inside the lantern, a simple cotton wick in a small dish of oil, and flame springs up, steady and warm, and you close the lantern door, and the light becomes diffused through the stone's translucent panels, carved thin enough to allow illumination while protecting the flame from wind and rain. You rise and move to the next lantern, and the next, each one positioned at a turning of the path or a point of particular significance, where the stream crosses under a small bridge, where a particularly ancient bamboo cluster creates a natural arch, where the path steepens toward the shrine on its elevated ground. Some lanterns are tall, standing posts rising from the earth. Others are low, squatting forms meant to illuminate the ground more than the air. And each has its own character, its own particular weathering and moss growth, its own way of holding light. And you know them all individually, though you could not say when you learned to distinguish one from another, the knowledge arriving gradually through repetition and attention. The work of lighting takes perhaps half an hour, moving through the forest in a circuit that has been walked so many times it exists as much in your body as in your mind, your feet finding their way without conscious guidance, your hands knowing exactly where each lantern door opens, where the wick waits. And as you progress, the forest transforms around you, the pools of warm amber light creating islands in the gathering darkness, and the paths between lanterns become journeys from light to shadow, to light again. And you find this progression deeply satisfying, this evidence of care, this small pushing back against the night, not from fear, but from service, from the understanding that others may walk these paths after dark, pilgrims arriving late, priests moving between buildings, animals crossing from one part of the forest to another, and they should not walk in complete darkness if human hands can prevent it. The final lantern is at the shrine itself, the largest and most ornate, positioned before the small torii gate that marks the boundary between ordinary space and sacred space. And when you light this one, the shrine seems to emerge from shadow, its simple wooden structure and thatched roof suddenly present and welcoming, and you bow to it as you always do. A brief inclination of head and shoulders, acknowledging the kami enshrined here, the spirit of the forest, the presence that watches over this place and allows you the honor of watching over it in turn. And when you rise, the evening's first round is complete, and the forest glows with small lights like stars brought down to earth. And you feel the familiar satisfaction of duty performed, of simple work done well. The shrine's guardian post is a simple structure, barely more than a roof and 3 walls, open to the east where it faces the small courtyard and the shrine itself, raised slightly off the ground on a wooden platform to keep it dry during the rainy season. Inside, there is a single tatami mat, a small shelf for a few supplies, and a compact clay brazier for heating water. And this small space has been your evening companion for so many years that returning to it feels less like arriving at a destination and more like reuniting with an old friend who asks nothing, offers everything, simply exists in patient welcome. You remove your sandals at the platform's edge and step up onto the tatami, feeling its familiar slight give beneath your feet. And you kneel before the brazier and check the charcoal. Laid carefully this morning, it has burned down through the day to a bed of perfect coals, glowing faintly orange beneath a layer of white ash. And you add a few small pieces of fresh charcoal, positioning them carefully to catch the heat from below, and almost immediately they begin their slow transformation from black to red, the fire accepting the offering, continuing its patient burning. Water waits in a small iron kettle. You filled it from the stream before beginning your rounds, and you position it carefully on the brazier's grate and settle back to wait. And waiting has become something you're good at. Not the restless waiting of hoping time will pass, but the active waiting of being present while time does what time does, which is simply continue, neither fast nor slow, just itself. And you watch the kettle and listen to the forest and allow your breathing to slow and deepen, matching the pace of evening, of charcoal burning, of water gradually warming. The forest around the shrine sounds different than the deeper forest, more open, allowing more sky, and therefore more receptive to the evening breezes that have begun to move down from the mountains, carrying the cooler air of higher elevations. And you can hear this air arriving in waves through the bamboo canopy, the rustling approach and passage, and each wave brings a subtle drop in temperature, a freshening, and you're grateful for it because the day has been warm, and the walk through the forest has raised a light sweat that now begins to cool, making your cotton clothing feel pleasant against your skin rather than clinging. The kettle begins to murmur, not a boil yet, but the first signs of heating. The stage called shrimp eyes by the old tea masters, when tiny bubbles form at the bottom and release, and you take down your tea things from the shelf. A simple ceramic cup, rough and thick-walled, glazed in a pale celadon green that looks almost gray in the evening light, and a bamboo container holding coarse sencha tea leaves, twisted and dark green, releasing their grassy scent when you open the lid. The preparation of evening tea is not ceremony, not the formal practice of tea masters with their prescribed movements and aesthetic considerations, but rather necessity become ritual through repetition. The simple making of tea elevated by attention, by care, by the understanding that even ordinary acts can be performed with grace. When the water reaches the second stage, fish eyes, larger bubbles rising more regularly, you remove the kettle and pour water directly over the tea leaves you've placed in the cup. And immediately, the leaves begin to unfurl, dancing in the hot water, releasing their color and flavor, and the scent rises with the steam, vegetal and slightly sweet, and you breathe it in deeply. This smell that means evening, means transition, means the beginning of the long, quiet watch that will carry you through the night. You sit at the shrine post's edge, legs dangling over the platform, teacup cradled in both hands, and you listen to the bamboo with the whole of your attention, not analyzing or categorizing what you hear, but simply receiving it, allowing the forest's voice to fill your awareness completely. The wind has strengthened slightly, not storm wind, nothing approaching weather, but the steady evening air movement that comes almost every summer night, flowing down from the mountains as the heated valley air rises, creating a circulation as reliable as breathing. And the bamboo responds to this wind with its endless vocabulary of sound. The leaves are the highest voice, the finest grain of sound. Millions of small bamboo leaves rustling against each other, creating a texture like distant rain or like waves on a shore heard from far away. A sound you feel as much as hear, a presence in the air. Beneath this, or within it, for the sounds don't layer so much as intermingle, becoming aspects of a single whole, you hear the creaking of the stalks themselves, the woody complaints as they sway and flex, testing their strength against the wind's pressure. And these creaks range from high to low, depending on the thickness of the stalk, the age of the wood, the exact point where stress concentrates. And together, they create a chorus without harmony, a music without resolution, simply sound expressing existence, bamboo being bamboo in wind. And then the knocking, that sound unique to bamboo forests, when swaying stalks touch at their surfaces and create percussion, hollow and resonant, each impact slightly different depending on where the stalks connect, how hard they meet, whether they slide past each other or knock and part cleanly. The knocking has no rhythm you can predict, but it has patterns you recognize, frequencies you've come to know. And you can tell from the sound that the wind is coming primarily from the northwest tonight, that it's moving in pulses rather than steady flow, that it's strong enough to move the mid-height bamboo, but not yet strong enough to really bend the ancient giants that stand at the grove's heart. Your tea has cooled enough to drink, and you take the first sip, letting the liquid enter your mouth slowly, tasting the slight bitterness, the vegetal sweetness beneath, the clean finish, and you swallow and feel the warmth descend into your chest and spread outward, and the tea's mild stimulation seems to sharpen your hearing rather than your thinking, making the forest sounds more distinct, more present, and you realize you've entered that state where you're not separate from what you're observing, not a listener and a sound, but simply awareness in which both listening and sound occur. And in this state, time becomes strange, becomes elastic, becomes irrelevant. A break in the wind brings a moment of relative quiet, and in that quiet, you hear other things. The stream's constant murmur, so steady you often don't consciously hear it, but it's always there, always speaking its water language. An owl calling from the forest's far edge, 2 descending notes repeated 3 times, then silence. The distant bark of a village dog, so far away it's barely audible. A reminder that the human world exists beyond this grove, though here, now, it feels entirely elsewhere, entirely other. The fireflies are more active now, their cold lights appearing throughout the shrine courtyard and among the bamboo, creating a second constellation to mirror the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, visible through the canopy gaps, and you watch them without trying to follow any individual light, letting your eyes unfocus slightly so the whole field of lights becomes a gentle shimmer, a living luminescence. And you finish your tea slowly, in small sips, making it last, because this moment, this precise combination of cooling evening and bamboo song and firefly light is perfect, is complete, and deserves to be honored with attention, with presence, with the simple act of being here, being now, being still. The night has settled fully now, the last traces of twilight gone from even the western sky, and it's time for the midnight round, the slow walk through the forest to ensure all is well, to check that the lanterns still burn, to offer your presence to the grove in its darkest hours. You rise from the shrine post, feeling the stiffness in your legs from sitting, and you stretch briefly before taking down your hand lantern, a chochin of oiled paper on a bamboo frame, collapsible for storage, but extended now to its full cylindrical shape, with a single candle inside, providing a warm glow that illuminates only a small sphere around you, perhaps 2 arms' lengths in each direction, enough to see the path, to navigate the forest, but not enough to banish the larger darkness. And that's appropriate, you think, because you're not here to conquer the night, but to move through it with respect, with care. The path by lantern light is different than the path in daylight or even twilight. The world contracts to what the light reveals, and everything beyond the small circle becomes suggestion rather than certainty. Shapes that might be familiar bamboo or might be shadow playing tricks, and you've learned to trust your feet, to let them find the way while your eyes adjust to this new way of seeing, this navigation by partial knowledge and memory and faith that the path continues beyond where your light can reach. The gravel crunches softly beneath your sandals, the sound louder now in the night quiet, and your lantern sways slightly with your walking rhythm, causing the light to move across the bamboo stalks in slow waves, illuminating their pale undersides where lichens grow in subtle patterns. The stone lanterns you lit earlier still burn, their flames steady behind stone panels, and you check each one as you pass, ensuring the oil hasn't run low, that no wind has found its way past the protective walls to threaten the wick, and finding them all intact gives you satisfaction, as though the forest and you are partners in this work of maintaining light, of holding small certainties against the vast, uncertain dark. At the third lantern you pause, because something has changed. A large bamboo frond has fallen and lies across the path, not blocking it entirely, but present, notable, and you pick it up and move it carefully to the side, feeling its weight, the suppleness of the still living leaves, even though the connection to the stalk has broken, and you lay it respectfully among the ferns where it will decompose and return to the forest floor, becoming soil, becoming the foundation for new growth. The bamboo is quieter now than earlier, the evening wind having settled into a gentler pattern, less urgent, more contemplative, and the forest feels settled into night, committed to darkness, comfortable in its own depth. You hear creatures moving occasionally, the rustle of something small in the undergrowth, probably a tanuki, or perhaps a fox, the animals who belong to night and move through the forest on their own mysterious errands. And you don't try to see them, don't intrude with your light, just acknowledge their presence and continue your walk, sharing the space, each following their own path, their own purpose. When you complete the circuit and return to the shrine, you find yourself reluctant to set the lantern down, to end this moving meditation, this slow dance with light and shadow. And so, you walk the inner courtyard once more, tracing its boundaries, the lantern casting your shadow long against the shrine wall. And when you finally return to the guardian post and extinguish the hand lantern, carefully pinching the wick and watching the small smoke rise and dissipate, you feel you've done the work the night required. You've been present for the forest in its darkness, and that presence matters, even if, especially if, no one else knows it happened. The shrine altar is simple, as befits a small forest shrine dedicated not to one of the great named kami, but to the spirit of the place itself, to bamboo-ness, to grove being, to whatever presence inhabits and animates this particular gathering of earth and water and green growing stalks. The altar sits on a wooden platform raised above the ground, protected from rain by the shrine's extended roof, and upon it rest the offerings you placed this morning, and must now verify remain undisturbed, remain acceptable, remain properly positioned as signs of respect and gratitude to the kami who allows you to serve here. You approach the altar with a deep bow, hands together, and you kneel on the wooden platform before it, close enough to examine, but not so close as to crowd the sacred space, and you check each offering in turn. The small ceramic dishes of salt and rice, the most basic gifts, pure and simple, representing sustenance and preservation. And both remain exactly as you placed them, the grains of rice gleaming faintly in the altar's small oil lamp light, the salt crystals catching that same light like tiny stars. The evergreen sakaki branch in its small vase, its leaves still fresh and green, though they will need replacing tomorrow or the day after, their vitality being part of the offering. And the incense, represented by a single stick standing in a bowl of ash, long since burned down, but its fragrance still faintly present in the air, sandalwood and perhaps aloes wood, the scent speaking of prayers sent upward, intentions offered, gratitude expressed. The altar's oil lamp, a different vessel than the path lanterns, burns with a steadier flame, protected in its small glass chamber, and you check that the oil level remains adequate, that the wick hasn't charred unevenly, and satisfied that it will burn through the night, you add a few drops from the small supply bottle kept in a cabinet beside the altar. Not because the lamp needs it now, but because the act of tending, of maintaining, of ensuring continuity is itself a form of offering, a demonstration of care that extends beyond the minimum required. Behind the altar, in the small inner sanctum visible through the open doors, hangs the shrine's sacred mirror, its surface kept polished and clean. And though you cannot see it clearly from your position, you know it's there, and knowing is enough, because the mirror represents the presence of the kami, the way that divine attention reflects the world, sees what needs seeing, understands what needs understanding. You bow again, deeper this time, holding the position for a slow count of 10 breaths, feeling the stretch in your back, the pressure on your knees. And these small physical discomforts are also part of the practice, reminders that you are body as well as spirit, flesh as well as intention. When you rise, you light a fresh stick of incense, using a splinter touched to the altar lamp, and you position it in the ash bowl beside the burned-out stick from morning, and you watch the smoke rise, thin and straight in the still air of the shrine's sheltered space, carrying upward whatever prayers or gratitude or simple acknowledgement you hold, without needing to form them into words. Because some things are better expressed in gesture and presence than in language, better shown than said, better enacted than explained. And the rising smoke speaks all of this without words, speaks it perfectly, speaks it complete. The deepest part of night has passed, that hour when darkness feels most complete and morning seems impossibly distant. And though dawn is still hours away, you can sense a subtle shift in the forest's presence, a slight easing of night's grip. Not yet the approach of light, but rather the quiet acknowledgement that light will come, eventually, as it always does. That this darkness is not permanent, but a phase, a necessary rest between one day and the next. Your body tells you it's time to lie down, to take your own rest, while the forest rests, while the lanterns continue their steady burning without requiring your attention. The guardian post has a simple sleeping platform, a wooden frame with thin padding and a single cotton blanket. And you've slept on this narrow bed so many nights that your body knows its exact dimensions, knows how to position itself for maximum comfort on minimal cushioning. And you lie down now with a sigh that's pure release, pure permission to stop moving, stop tending, stop being active, and become instead receptive, allowing the night to hold you rather than you holding vigil over the night. The blanket you pull up only to your waist because the summer air is warm enough. The forest's breath is gentle enough. And lying here with your body cooling from the exertions of walking and checking and tending, you feel perfectly comfortable, perfectly positioned between too hot and too cold. In that narrow band of temperature where the body can forget itself, can simply be. The bamboo is your lullaby. The endless, subtle variations of its voice surrounding the shrine in a sphere of sound that is both presence and absence, both something happening and nothing happening. Just bamboo being bamboo in night wind. And you listen without listening, hear without effort, allowing the sounds to flow through your awareness without catching on anything, without creating thought or story, just sound arriving and continuing and fading into the next sound in an endless progression that has no beginning you can identify and no ending you can anticipate. And this progression is deeply restful, deeply hypnotic, and you feel your breathing synchronize with some rhythm in it, some pattern your body recognizes, even if your mind does not. Above you, through the guardian post's partial roof, you can see a section of sky, and the stars are dense tonight, so many visible that they seem less like individual points and more like a luminous dust scattered across darkness. And you know some of their patterns, some of the stories told about their arrangements. But tonight, you don't think about stories, don't identify constellations, just see light against dark, near against far. The visible universe reduced to this simple binary, this fundamental contrast. And even this seeing is effortless, requires nothing, just eyes open and light entering. The stone lanterns continue burning somewhere in the darkness. You can't see them from here, but you know they're there, faithful in their work as you've been faithful in yours. Small lights holding their small territories against the vast darkness, not conquering it, because that's impossible and not the purpose, but simply being light where they are, simply doing what they were made to do. And you too are doing what you were made to do, what you chose to do, or what chose you. The distinction has become unclear over the years, and the doing is complete now, for this night, for these hours, and you can rest, and the forest will rest with you, and the lanterns will burn, and the bamboo will speak, and the world will continue its patient turning, and all of this is exactly as it should be. Sleep comes not as a sudden dropping, but as a gradual dissolving, a gentle transition from waking awareness to something softer, less defined, and you're not sure when it happens, when the listening becomes dreaming, becomes sleeping. because the boundaries are permeable here, the edges uncertain. And perhaps it doesn't matter. Perhaps sleep and waking are less different than you once thought. Both simply states of consciousness. Both simply ways of being present to the forest, to the night, to the endless, patient existence of bamboo and stone and stars. Your breathing has slowed to match the forest's deepest rhythm, that underlying pulse that exists beneath the surface variations, beneath the wind-created movement and sound, down to the fundamental rate at which bamboo grows, which is to say, slowly but continuously, imperceptibly but undeniably, adding increments of height and girth that only become visible over weeks and months. And somehow your body knows this rhythm, has learned it through years of living here, sleeping here, and your breath rises and falls in synchrony with this deep forest time. This pace that measures itself not in heartbeats, but in seasons, not in hours, but in years. The sounds continue, they never stop. Not truly, because the bamboo never stops moving, never stops responding to air currents and temperature shifts, and the earth's subtle movements, never stops being alive. But your relationship to the sounds has changed. They've become less something you hear and more something you're part of. Like a fish doesn't hear water, but exists within it, moves through it, is shaped by it. And you exist now within the bamboo's voice, within its hollow knocking and leaf rustling and stalk creaking. And this existing within is perfectly comfortable, perfectly safe, perfectly right. Dreams may come or may not come. You're not aware enough to know, not conscious enough to distinguish between the images that rise and fall behind your eyelids and the sounds that rise and fall in the darkness around you, between memory and sensation, between past and present, and all of it becomes part of the same flow, the same gentle current carrying you deeper into rest, into release, into the blessed, temporary forgetting of self that is sleep's greatest gift. If you dream, perhaps you dream of bamboo, of walking endless forest paths, of lighting lanterns that multiply into infinity, of kneeling before altars that shift and change, but remain somehow the same. And these dreams, if they occur, are not separate from waking, but rather waking refracted through sleep, filtered and transformed, but recognizable, still home. The lanterns burn on through your sleeping, faithful to their purpose, maintaining their small territories of light. And if one should gutter out before dawn, it doesn't matter. The forest has held darkness before and will again. And one lantern more or less doesn't change the fundamental nature of the grove, doesn't diminish the presence that dwells here, doesn't alter the fact that you're here, sleeping your guard duty sleep, resting your watchman's rest, held by the very thing you're meant to hold, protected by the very thing you're meant to protect. Because that's how these things work. That's the secret at the heart of service. The serving and the served become one. The watching and the watched merge. the guardian and the guarded are revealed to be not two things, but one thing seen from different angles. And this understanding lives in your body, even if your sleeping mind can't articulate it. The bamboo breathes. The forest holds you. The night continues its patient procession toward dawn. And you sleep, deeply and completely, cradled in the hollow, knocking music of 10,000 stalks, wrapped in the verdant darkness, held by roots that go down deeper than you can imagine, and stems that rise higher than you can see. Safe in the sacred grove, home in the forest, at rest in the heart of the bamboo's ancient song, exactly where you've always been, exactly where you'll always be, sleeping the sleep of the faithful watchman who knows, even in sleep, that the watch continues, that the grove endures, that the light burns on, that all is well, has always been well, will always be well. And this knowledge is the deepest rest of all, the sleep beyond sleep, the peace that requires nothing, the home that was never left, the arrival that was always already here.